Moving on, I want to bring up an update on the GOP's war on voting. This happened on Monday, which was, of course, Inauguration Day. It was also Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Well, so here's the deal. Virginia State Senator and civil rights leader and attorney Henry Marsh was in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration and for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So Republicans in Virginia decided to use this civil rights leader's absence as an opportunity to gerrymander the state and disenfranchise Democratic voters. How's that for nice, huh? How's that for celebrating MLK's legacy, huh? Let's take the absence of a civil rights leader and use it to make people's votes not count. The gerrymandering vote passed in Virginia 20-19. If Marsh would have been there, it would not have been passed, but he wasn't there. He was off celebrating Martin Luther King's legacy. He was off celebrating the re-election of the first black president in our country's history, like a chump, like a sucker. And so the Virginia GOP pushed through this disgusting gerrymandering bill. To top it off, Talking Points memo actually reported that the GOP actually adjourned the session. They adjourned the session by honoring the memory of Confederate General Stonewall Jackson. I'm not kidding. They really did that. They ended the session by honoring the head of the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson. Well, at least they're being obvious about their intentions, I guess. But speaking of obvious, folks, if you had any doubt about the GOP's war on voting, which if you listen to the show regularly, you shouldn't, the Republican State Leadership Committee, which is a national organization of different Republican state leaders, State Leadership Committee, there you go. Well, the Republican State Leadership Committee released a report literally bragging about how gerrymandering gave the GOP control of the House of Representatives in the 2012 election. You remember we actually talked about this before, about how nationwide Democrats in the House got over 1 million more votes than Republicans in the House did. Despite 1 million more people voting for Democrats in the House of Representatives, Republicans have 233 House members to the Democrats' 192 House members. The Democrats got more votes, 1 million more votes, and they have some 39 less members. That seems American, don't you think? More votes, less members? That's a really American principle, don't you think? Well, anyway, the Republican State Leadership Committee's report, where they bragged about it, was actually called How a Strategy of Targeting State Legislative Races in 2010 Led to a Republican House Majority in 2013. Pretty obvious, but it's obvious. It's something we've been talking about forever. One of the things also we've talked about on the show is how much Republicans and the right get, how much of the battle for everything that we're fighting for happens on the state level. Reading from Think Progress, the report, quote, details how the group spent $30 million in the 2010 election cycle to sweep up low-cost state legislature races in blue states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Their efforts were so successful, in fact, that Republicans went from controlling both legislative chambers in 14 states before Election Day to 25 states afterward. In turn, the new Republican majorities would be tasked with redrawing congressional districts for the 2012 election. Quote, the rationale was straightforward, the report reads, controlling the redistricting process in these states would have the greatest impact on determining how both the state legislative and congressional district boundaries would be drawn, end quote. They stole it, folks. They stole it, and they're bragging about it. And look, I'm not saying that Democrats don't do some gerrymandering as well. Obviously, they do. Hell, I lived in Illinois. Believe me, they do it. However, Republicans I'm sorry, this is not a controversial statement to say. Republicans do it more. They do it more, and they do it better. They do it much better than Democrats do. But that's beside the point. The fact that either party is allowed to do it should be a huge scandal. It should be a gigantic scandal. I don't want Republicans gerrymandering. I don't want Democrats gerrymandering. Why on earth do we allow our democracy to be structured in a way that is so open to obvious corruption? We'll be right back.